My name's Kirby. I help people with emotional processing and understanding how trauma is impacting their life. In my past, when I would be in a situation where there was a major emotional upset, usually a romantic breakup or a conflict with a friend or family member, my nervous system would dysregulate so hard, so extensively that I would say that I was just shy of a wild animal. I remember those days with a bit of hazy memory, but still, like, I remember times of doing things that were just cringe, horrifically embarrassing, sometimes destructive to like my lifestyle or where I lived or some of my friendships. And there would be this intense pain, misery inside, that the intensity was completely overwhelming. It came on like suddenly, like a tsunami going 100 miles an hour, and it would just like crash into me, and then I was lost. It affected the way I thought. Yeah, it affected my mind for sure. It affected my body, my health, couldn't sleep, would lose appetite, got to a point of extreme emotional reactivity. Like my emotions were volatile to the point that like I'd be talking with a friend actually reached out in support, and I would run to the place where we're meeting, and I look forward to it all day because it's like, oh, it's going to be this point of connection, and there's going to be somebody there, and someone's going to hold me, right, or hold space for me. And I would get there, and I'd be buzzing with energy. It's just shaking and pupils dilating and fingers twitching and shortness of breath and high blood pressure and high heart rate and this intense jittery energy. And then, a friend who legitimately cares is sitting there and they're completely overwhelmed. They're like, whatever's happening here is a level of intensity I'm not prepared for. Like, I'm not capable of this. So it's just like, how can I hold just enough space so you don't feel like you're abandoned? And you know that like I do care and I do want you to have a better. And they'd offer this advice. It's like, oh, there's many fish in the sea, or why are you so focused on someone that doesn't want you, and la 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 la, right? And the intensity of my emotional dysregulation was so desperate for attention and validation and connection in any way that it would just like compel me to just grab onto any situation possible that could be there. And there would be someone that would say, you're important enough that I choose to be here. I would glom on to any situation where I believe that there would be a person there that would look at me fondly, right? That would choose me, that would prioritize me. And so there's this like cloying, clingy desperation that would like consume my mind and body and actions as I'm desperately grabbing for all this. And, I would go places and I'd had enough, wherewithal to just like suppress it just enough that I could like sit in a business meeting, even though inside I'm just like jittering with pain and anxiety. And I could have a discussion here or there, or I could, push it down with someone where I didn't want to be vulnerable. I didn't want to share this. But in that time, 10 or 11 years ago, I remember I was flying a lot during that time for business and other things. And there would be times where it would just be like, I'd turn to some person sitting next to me in the airplane and just start some casual conversation. And then, as long as it's kind of light, fluffy stuff, I'm sitting here being like, this is great. I'm connecting with someone. I'm being normal. I'm not being an insane monster right now. And then they would ask about me, and I've been reading these books on self-help and development and stuff, and it's just like, oh, vulnerability is what creates connection with people, and it's just like, and this intensity that's inside me wanted to share my story, wanted to point fingers of blame and shame to the other person, and then it would just come out of me like, again, like a tidal wave, and this total stranger is just like, whoa, you got a lot, you know. And then I could see it in their face, and it was like, I'm being judged, I'm too much, I'm unwanted, I don't know how to handle myself, I don't know how to handle all these emotions. And then that shame spiral would start, and it's just like, I am so fundamentally broken. What possible way is there, right? I live with this burden of this emotional pain, and then the shame for the fact that I have this emotional pain, I don't know how to manage it, and then I have shame for the fact that I'm living in shame all the time, right? It's legitimately this like crazy shame spiral. And sure enough, as you would expect in some stories, that the person afflicted by such misery, which was me, gets to a dark, heavy night where it's just like, why go on? And I remember that. I remember that clearly. I remember many of these moments very, very clearly. And of course I want it out, right? This feels terrible. I don't want to feel like this. I want my life to be different. Like, I want to be able to connect with people in a healthy way. Like, I don't want to overwhelm every single nice human being that speaks to me. You know, I want to be different, which is kind of the first sign of self-rejection. So I, reach out to a therapist, and I, 2 or 3 at one point, and enroll in these online programs, and I download these worksheets, and I'm filling these worksheets out, trying to anyway. I turned to spirituality first, and I kind of like did this like round robin jump between the various religions that I knew. And, the couple that I had spent time in the past, which is Christianity being the main one, a little bit with Buddhism. And then I was living in an Islamic country at the time. And so I'm like, oh, maybe they have the answer. And I would like go dig into that and try to learn more. And then I was just like, no, I saw enough around me to conclude that I was like, this doesn't have what I'm looking for. And then the Eastern religions, and I got back into Buddhism for a while, and I was like, okay, I need to meditate and loving kindness and metta, I think they call that. And I would start using the word doka a lot, or doka, I think. It's just kind of this Buddhist term, it might be Sanskrit, for unsatisfactoriness. And so I would learn all these terminology from different spiritual practices and philosophy books and that kind of stuff. And I'd go to these like social gatherings, and I'd kind of, sprinkle these words around and make sure that people knew that I was intelligent, or that I was doing the work, or whatever, right? It's embarrassing and cringe to admit it, but that's totally where I was. And I'm sharing that now for any of you out there that are in the same place or remember being in the same place. Right? Do these things resonate with you? Do you have stories like this? I bet you do. And I hope you have the courage to share them. So here I am, this dysregulated monster, the tail end of a marriage that I had literally made my entire life with a person that I adored beyond all others. And it was just going down in flames in the worst possible ways. And I lost myself. I didn't know what to do. Like, how does anyone ever survive this? And I almost didn't, several times. But eventually I go through the spirituality section of the major religions, and then I came to the Tao Te Ching, which is kind of a meeting of spiritualism and philosophy, and spent a year studying that, and that it really helped me frame a few things. I really liked the way that it affects my mindset. But honestly, I did pursue the path of non-doing from the Taoist perspective of basically, I went through this exercise for months and months where I tried to remove meaning from all things. because I realized that it was like the suffering that I felt inside only existed because I'd attached meaning to it. Like, this person chooses someone else instead of me, and that is only painful because I think that means something. That inside my system, it is attaching meaning to this action that a person is taking, which is true. But the path that I walked and experimented with for quite some time was this way of just erasing. I like basically had this systematic way of gaslighting myself into just erasing any meaning from anything that felt the slightest bit uncomfortable. And so it created this lifestyle where I kind of just walked through life without really any intense meaning or purpose. And I'd be like, oh, there's hunger there. And it's like, oh, this is a time for food. And it's like, well, it looks delightful. And I would like go for things that would bring pleasure, the kind of a hedonistic pleasure to me in this moment without any care for the future, because I'm just like, nothing means anything. I experimented with that path for a while, and it did successfully help me regulate. It helped me reach a better place until the next moment, the next crucible. For those who don't know, the crucible is the little bowl that they use when they're smelting iron or steel, where they basically burn off impurities, right? This is the thing that you pour your molten metal into, and then all the impurities float to the top and then are basically expelled. So the crucible in psychological and relationship terms is the thing where you go, where you're finally tested. You think you've made all this progress. You think you have reached a point that is beyond this suffering and misery that you've been experiencing because you've been gaslighting yourself so well. But then you get to the crucible. You get to the moment where you're like with someone you care about and you want to have a future together, and they choose someone else. It's the same repeat of the previous wound from years ago. And then it comes in, and here I am in the crucible, and I'm like, how do I behave? Oh, the same way? Oh, I lose it again? Oh, I go back to being a wild animal? And then I look back and I'm just like, all this mysticism that I'd embraced in, and all these various healing modalities and, self-help books and blah, blah, blah. How much impact did they really have? If I'm here in the same situation that created this whole mess and all this pain and misery in my life, and I'm reacting the same way, and I'm dysregulated the same way, and okay, so maybe the intensity is like a 10.7 instead of an 11, right? like there's a marginal shift, but it still ruins my life. Then what's going on? I come from an engineering background, and so I kind of like this idea that like you can have all the hypotheses you want, and you can spend all the time in the world to develop this elegant, beautiful solution to a problem, but you really don't know until you test it. You really don't know until you put that thing in the crucible and say, how are you going to survive? So the crucible came, and I fell into the same degree of emotional dysregulation, and I lost myself. And this time it was worse. I didn't think it could get any worse, but it did. It got to the point where I couldn't even hold myself balanced in those work meetings anymore. I could no longer suppress that pain and misery when I'm talking to a random stranger on the plane, or some family member at a gathering, or friends at the local pub or whatever. And the craving inside to run away from whatever the situation is and go find someplace, any person that will sit there and approve of me, to give me approval, that will say, you're okay, I like you. Transactional. So many of those interactions, in hindsight, I realized just became transactional. It's like, I'm going to be here, and I'm going to make you dinner, and I'll bring you flowers, and I'll write you poetry, and blah, 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 blah. I'll do this, I'll bend over backwards, putting my life energy into any kind of thing, activity, purchase, whatever, to put on the table. If you'll just say that you'll stay. If you'll just say that you choose me. even if it's just for one night, for one date, for one whatever. Transactional. Super toxic. Ugh. There is a way out. That's not clear yet. Those times are behind me, and they don't drive my life anymore. And being the engineer that I am, or the kind of brain I have, or whatever it is, my brain tracks change. It is vigilantly watching cause and effect relationships in many, many facets. And so as I walked through the healing journey, my brain was watching various things and saying what worked, what didn't work. And it's like, oh, I did the psychedelic thing and I have all these thoughts on that. And it's like, oh, I did sound healing and crystal meditation and loving kindness meditation and extreme exercise and DBT and MDMA and whatever, like a whole host of different traditional Freudian psychotherapy and analytical psychotherapy. And I don't know, like the list is long. And there's one point I basically just discovered adult attachment theory, which was crucial. That was a crucial turning point because for the first time ever, there was this model that someone was presenting of psychology that wasn't just like, this is a way to change your thoughts or something to basically bring you to a point of regulation. You know, we're going to engage in this activity or mindset so that you can go back to feeling better, right? Many of them that I engaged in, that's kind of what it was all about. It was like, we're just going to do these things, you know, think this instead of that, make this kind of list instead of doing that, whatever. Do these things so that you can get back to feeling good. And then we're going to say we're done. And then away you go. Attachment theory was different because attachment theory was more about the why. It's like, what is going on and how did we get to this place? How did you get to this place? And so I take this attachment theory test, which, you know, there's this 4-quadrant model, which is like secure, anxious, preoccupied, dismissive, avoidant on the other side. And then kind of here in the middle is one that they might call fearful avoidant, or in the original studies it was called disorganized because they struggled to understand the patterns. So I take the test and I get 3% secure. I get like 37% avoidant or anxious, preoccupied. And then the rest is split between the other ones. And so I'm just like, okay, I'm only 3% secure and the rest of me is fucked up. And then the other funny satirical part of my brain says like, oh, you know, when it comes to insecure attachment, we're an overachiever. Yay. Dad would be so proud. So then I'm like, wow, what do I do about this? So I enroll in this program and I talk to this teacher and attend the webinars, and I really do adore this person. But like I mentioned earlier, attachment theory isn't really about treatment. It's not really about getting you to a point where you feel better. It's about understanding the fundamental psychological mechanisms that are at play that bring you to a point where this breakup is so destabilizing that it threatens your whole life. Why? How did we get here? What are the things that make it be like this? And if that's true, then what are the things we can do to make it be less like that, right? So you're kind of like coming at this problem almost from a functional engineering type perspective, that it says, these are the gears, here's the dials that we have access to, here's the levers we can pull, and here's the feedback mechanisms we can watch for to test for change. You know, see if there's actually been meaningful change. And from an engineer brain, that was amazing. But in this particular program, the treatment generally boiled down to watch these videos, learn this information, and then here's a worksheet attached to the video, download the worksheet, print it out, and then fill out this stuff. And so I'm filling these things out and I'm circling and, you know, underlining and doing little commentary in the edges, which ends up being long commentary, which ends up being an entire emotional rant fueled by my subconscious inner child, that then I now have to get a journal next to it and like continue the rant for an hour. And then I come back to the worksheet and I'm just like, I don't have energy for this anymore. I'm going to go get a pizza, right? Those are on the good days. On the bad days, I would sit down and I'd make myself tea and I'd sit in front of the fireplace and I get my little worksheets out in front of me and say, okay, I'm going to do the work. And I'd sit there and I'd get my name on the top of it or whatever, the first or second question. And then there would be this resistance inside me so profound. Felt like every element of my existence was just saying, no, 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 do not do this. Call your friend, call this other friend, here's a whole list of people. And I would just run them through like a slideshow, all the different people that I knew that might actually be willing to meet up with me soon. And so I was like, oh, well, I'm going to manage my social calendar. And I would like call these friends and it would like go out and blah, 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 right? And I realized in hindsight, looking back on it now, that my nervous system was so desperately craving for attention, validation, and connection from another person that it was just like, we are not going to sit here and face our pain alone. We're not going to sit here and do these worksheets and study whatever it is that's going on and then realize just how fucked up we are while we're sitting alone in this big empty house. So it said no. And when the subconscious says no, good luck overcoming that. The teacher from this exact program was the first person to teach me the phrase, you cannot outwill your subconscious. And I 100% believe in that. If your subconscious or inner child, I use them interchangeably, if your subconscious has made a decision, it has every physiological and psychological power it needs to just override anything that you think. We don't get to make that decision because the subconscious says, no, something else is more important. The fundamental needs of our survival is more important than whatever it is you're thinking about right now. So it releases the right hormones and the right set of chemicals, which I call pushing the hijack button, hits the hijack button, and then my willpower, sometimes my very consciousness, will just go into sleep, suppressed, in the background, whatever, and then it goes off and pursues the thing that it wants. And when it finally is satisfied, it will take its finger off the button, and I come back, and what does my memory say? My memory is foggy. I call this brain fog, which is one of the physiological signs that a traumatic activation just occurred. So I realize I'm so desperately craving for connection and attention and validation and whatever. And again, I'm back in that same loop. I'm overloading the goodwill of the friendships that are presented to me, the friendships that are around me. I'm not just overloading, I'm consuming. I'm consuming the goodwill and time of these lovely people that wanted to be there in support of me. But the depths of my pain was so overwhelming, and the lock that it had on my nervous system was so out of control that I would just suck these friendships dry. And that's one of my greatest regrets in my life. And of course, I realize now with self-compassion that it's like I didn't really have that much control over what was going on. I was just shy of a wild animal. I was fully hijacked. My subconscious had put my mind, my consciousness, my identity, my subconscious took the driving wheel of the car and said, you don't get to drive anymore. And then I'm just a passenger that gets to wake up in the in-between times. And that feels completely out of control. That feels like you're crazy. And it feels very, very shameful, because the messaging we get from the culture around us tells us that's not acceptable. What's more, they say that's not normal. There's something wrong with you if you go into these states of like emotional activation that's so intense that you lose your brain. And that, my friends, is one of the first messages that I want to crush in the bad way, not the good way. I want you to erase that idea from your mind, because a major turning point in overcoming all of this and reaching a point of happiness, stillness, equanimity, safe, grounded, I can pass any attachment test with fully secure now. To reach that, one of the things you need to not just accept, but embrace is that emotional dysregulation is the way that the human nervous system processes stress. We don't have many other ways. Arguably, no other ways. Emotional dysregulation is the way your body delves into wherever that emotional intensity is, pulls it to the surface, and allows it to explode out of us, taking over mind, body, and everything in this shaking, shuddering mass, right? What's that all about? That's releasing of stored energy. If you look at Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett and her view on emotions, which she's a superstar, I highly recommend her book, How Emotions Are Made. Lisa Feldman Barrett, How Emotions Are Made. She turns the whole field of emotional research on its ear by presenting this idea that emotions are actually a action plan. It's a combination of stored potential. Your body is seeing patterns in the outside world, patterns of data, this door's open, that window's closed, this person's shouting, that person's not, whatever. It's seeing patterns of data and associating that with like, oh, in this situation, I need to be prepared to act in this way. And so it goes in kind of like, and it pre-charges all the neuromuscular network of stuff inside the body to basically preload probably the glycogen stores, but maybe other things, so that when that moment comes, we can act almost as if we anticipated it. Because from a neurological perspective, we did anticipate it. But how that all exists inside our body, like you can think of it as millions and millions of like little power banks, all various places. And when which power banks are turned on and which ones are not, kind of filters up to the mind interprets this pattern and says, emotion. So understanding that these emotions arising inside me are a feedback mechanism to tell my system that I was prepared for something. But if that thing I'm prepared for doesn't happen, I still have all the charge. I still have everything prepped. And then in order to discharge that, we need to expend energy. This is one of the reasons that going to the gym or extreme physical, a lot of people, when they're going through a major emotional episode, they will lean on extreme physical activity. They'll go run a marathon, they'll start training, they'll go to the gym, they'll, do power yoga, whatever, right? They will engage with physical activities that consume a great deal of a great deal of physical energy. It will leave them drained. And in the act of leaving them drained, when we're lucky, it will actually drain out all this kind of stored potential that was pre-charged for some anticipation. And then the emotion goes away because the energy that was driving the emotion has been consumed. Hope that makes sense. That was another turning point for me. So getting back to my prior point, understanding that emotional dysregulation is the secret sauce that allows our nervous system to process these moments of stress and to discharge powerful emotional states. Wow. So all these times that I was like just shy of a wild animal and behaving like with insanity, that was my nervous system trying to discharge big emotional payload. Does that make sense? And I think back on it, yes, it totally makes sense. It's not just making sense, but it was just like the light bulb going off over the head and this massive revelation and all this shame that was attached to this, like I'm broken because I can't control myself, wisps away. And I'm left with this just fundamental, almost like an engineering problem. It's just like, oh, I live inside a body that has been taxed beyond its capacity many, many times over. And this thing that happens when I feel like I'm going to be abandoned or neglected or whatever, that triggers this huge emotional charge inside me, and it needs to discharge. So I get into TRE, which is tension release exercises, and some people call it somatic experiencing or whatever. And so I get really into that. And I began going through these episodes of like intentional discharging of neurological payload, like stored energy, stored potential. And it was glorious. Like glorious. So now we have another turning point. So we've got attachment theory. We have emotional dysregulation is the means to discharging an overwhelmed nervous system. And we have TRE, tension release exercises, as one mechanism of doing that. Ooh, we're starting to get onto something. Then I go through, this emotional charge. So, okay, scrap that previous bit up to here, from the pause to here. So then the next thing that I began to question is I'm like, well, where's all this emotional charge coming from? Right? It's like, oh, it's because your wife cheated on you, or because so-and-so didn't treat you well, or because you didn't get seen and heard enough, or, half your friends from childhood ended up in prison because they're like highly emotionally volatile, antisocial behavior. Looking for all these causes in my life and like, what are the things that, and then again, coming back to attachment theory and one of the teachers in that space, beginning to understand that it's just like the way that attachment wounds form in the first 24 months of life, maybe 36, but we can say for sure it's in the first 36, but we can also say there's a very high likelihood that the most intense ones happen in the first 12 months. That attachment wounds are this thing, this idea, a theory that kind of explains what's happening in the neurological system of an infant. And it's this idea that infant is overwhelmed in general by this cacophony of noise and stimulus that is life, and doesn't know what to do about it, and is trying to find its way. It's basically this massive chaotic puzzle, and is trying to figure out how to put any pieces together. And then there's this big, strong entity outside myself, which is mom. And she's there with me, helping me put the pieces together. And when it seems scary, she's there to help me soothe. When it feels super stressful, she's there to help me calm. And if I get really, really lost, she's there to bring me back. So there's this co-regulation. It's not just co-regulation, but it is a more mature, developed limbic system, an emotional processing system that is demonstrating and modeling to the younger, immature system what is appropriate behavior and how you behave under certain stressors. It's a super powerful thing. But inevitably, we have a moment where the child's nervous system is activating. Something just happened, and this is scary. And it might be a big, scary noise over there. It might be, a scary looking dog or a picture on a book or movie or something over here. Or it might just be an internal bodily sensation like gas moving around, or some kind of pain because like something's pinching my leg in the high chair. There's some stimulus that comes into that baby's nervous system that is scary. And the baby has no idea how to process this. And so it says, and so it begins activating. Why? Because that biological system, a young primate, really, has learned over millennia that activating the nervous system will motivate that organism to cry out and to fuss and to act out in a way that reaches out for help. And then the more mature system will come and aid. When that happens, both have a much higher chance of survival. So much about this comes down to survival instinct. So much about this comes down to fundamental mechanisms that live inside our mind that are seeking to reach a state of safety and survival. So that baby's nervous system is activating, and it reaches out and says, "Wah!" And then what happens? Mom's on a phone call. She's ironing the clothes. She's watching her favorite TV show, or she's doom scrolling TikTok, or she's busy making the dishes, right? She is occupied with some other activity. And the baby's like, and mom doesn't come. And in that moment, that little brain that's trying to put all these puzzle pieces together, there's one puzzle piece that says, my pain, my fear, my need, my sense of being lost and hopeless in this world is not a priority for mom. There's something else out there that's more important. Because that baby's brain doesn't have a concept of kind of values over time yet. Because the developmental stage of that brain, it's basically here and now. And so it says, here and now, as I have this need and I am terrified, and I need you, mom, to come tell me that this is okay and help me regulate, and mom doesn't come, because that baby's brain does not have the idea that it's like, oh, this is important now. The dishes are important now, and mom will come in a couple of seconds. That developmental brain doesn't have that ability. And so it's just in now, right here, right now, this pain, this terror, this fear, and mom's prioritizing that sink with all the dishes. And I'm not important. And that creates such a profound sense of abandonment and hurt and rejection and et cetera, right? Now, the good news is most mothers in this situation will eventually put down the thing that is preoccupying them, and they will turn to the baby and they will go in for cuddling, soothing, encouragement, whatever. And because of the state of the baby's brain being mostly here and now, it will be like, oh, well, now things feel good. And then they'll laugh and giggle and coo, and it will seem like the wound that just happened is back in the distance. And it may be, because if my theories on trauma are correct, then it says that in that moment, you just prevented the formation of a trauma. If you were able to come soothe that nervous system and show that baby they're wanted, chosen, and prioritized in huge measure, right? In the moments after the point of abandonment, that their nervous system will then reach the end of the day with a sleep cycle and begin integrating all these thoughts together and turning it into a pattern that it's going to store in long-term memory. And the pattern it's going to encode is sometimes they don't come, but shortly afterwards they do. And then I'm not going to be alone in this world. Like it will be better. But unfortunately, as the case is, many family systems, many mother-child relationships have those moments where the mother is not able to come in that window of time afterwards. And by the time they do reach out and recall, and maybe it's after an 8-hour shift of work or whatever, and they do come in for a connection and validation and co-soothing, co-regulation with that child, the wound is done. The wound has been encoded. And I think this is, if the data that I've absorbed is correct, then there's a very strong correlation between the formation of these wounds in long-term memory and sleeping. And so if you have a very young child that has a moment of pain or abandonment, and there is no reconciliation or reconnection or co-regulation after that, and that child is sitting there in this sadness or fear of not being enough, whatever these beliefs are, and then that child naps, those memories are going to get encoded. And now we have a trauma memory. So it may seem like I'm digressing, but I really am coming back around to where I was a wild animal and was realizing the degree of pain and intensity and emotional dysregulation that I was suffering, like the huge emotional charge that lived inside my body. I began to realize that it's just like this is what's left. This is the response, the manifestation of all these prior experiences I had when I was a young child, and the attachment traumas that were formed during that time period. Just like this, it's a moment of needing, a moment of I'm scared and I need someone to come help me. And then my person doesn't come. And then I sleep. And now it's in my system. Probably back in the cerebellum, where kind of habits live, or at least action plans. And I'm in this, realizing this, I am seeing, I look back at the pattern of my life, and I'm seeing these themes arise, these fears that I have around relationship, and more importantly, the end of a relationship, and just how much effort I would put into trying to be acceptable enough, or lovable enough, or attractive enough, or servant enough, or nice enough, right? I had nice guy syndrome to the moon, which is also called codependent enmeshment, also called people pleasing, also called fawning. That I had this long history of people pleasing and fawning, nice guy syndrome, to try to get to a place where this person that I desire their attention would actually give it to me. And they would actually come over and they would choose to be close to me, and they'd choose to validate me, and they would choose to engage in the ways that I want to engage. Sex drive was super high. Why? Because that is one of the ultimate demonstrations of validation for another human being. I hope that doesn't ruffle too many feathers. I didn't know it at the time, but I see it now. And I've spoken to dozens or maybe hundreds of people about this, and many of them repeat the same ideas. That it's just like, as I began to truly heal inside myself, this crazy high sex drive that I had just diminished. And it's not like it goes away completely, but it's definitely not a driving force in my life anymore. And some of them, including myself, would go through this whole process and just be like, oh my God, my hormones are out of control. I'm losing my testosterone. I'm blaming it on the microplastics or the food additives or whatever, right? And some of those may be true, but it's just like, what's something that's simple, easy to understand, and spans a multitude of cases? And that's this. And that is that high drive is very likely being caused by unresolved attachment wounds, because it's like, I don't feel good enough, and I need someone to tell me that I am good enough. I need someone to be there for me. I need someone to choose me, to want me, to prioritize me over other things. And getting into a point where I make myself expose myself vulnerably to another human being in a sexual way, and they consent, and they're pursuing with lust and greed and craving and everything else. I'm just like, oh my God, I feel so good because they want me so much. And it's like, that's a crazy theory. That's a crazy damn theory, man. I remember in the days when that theory was first coming to me, and I was just like, nah, this can't be it. But I was making great strides in my own work and my own I was making great strides in my own progress. And then I was watching it just decline. And I get things checked, and I work out, and I take the supplements and all that kind of stuff. I'm just like, no, it's still here. It's just not driving my life anymore. Because I don't feel so much anxiety around it. I'm no longer at this place where I desperately need your attention. I desperately need your approval of me. Don't need it. So this concept of trauma, and that I began to understand that this trauma that lived inside me was driving this incredibly strong craving for validation, which I call validation addiction, because that's what it is. We are addicted, like drug fiends, to a constant stream of validation coming from external people. What are we craving for? We're craving for someone to sit there and tell us, you're okay, I want you. There's nothing wrong with you. Or no matter what state you're in, I still want to be with you. I still want to be here with you, and I want to be close with you. If the person says I want to be sexual with you, all the better, right? It feeds validation addiction like getting shot up. So I began to see how trauma works and how much I had inside my system, how much I had inside my nervous system. Some of it was accessible, a lot of it was not. And so I began to look at that with a laser focus. What is this that lives inside me, and how does it have an impact on my life? And I went through lots of trauma healing seminars and modalities there and all this other stuff. And some of them are helpful a little bit, other ones not as much, or completely not. And then it kind of dawns on me that like what I'm talking about here is just fear. What I'm talking about here, what's happening? What is like the experience that I can observe? I can like videotape it. I can record it. I can like write down a step-by-step sequence of events of what's going on inside my mind and my body. And I can see that it's like, this is just a really intense fear response. There's some trigger, some woman getting angry at me, or some partner that I really care about and I want to keep, and she's getting ready to walk out the door. Or, being home for the holidays and knowing that if I share this true aspect of my life, there's just going to be endless criticism and shaming from my parents. Like, these are just stimuli. They're like a data stream that comes into my nervous system, and it looks like this. Mom says this, dad says that. Mom looks this way, dad looks that way. They kind of express these certain physiological actions, the whew and the or whatever, right? Same thing with romantic partner. They exhibit a sequence of behaviors, and my nervous system sees that sequence of behaviors and says, threat, this is scary. We're afraid of this. And then it hits the hijack button and floods our system with cortisol, norepinephrine, and others. And it floods our system with cortisol and norepinephrine and a few others. And when those stress hormones are flooding through the system, it begins to have an impact on things. It has an impact on the blood vessels in our extremities, and they tighten up to make sure that it can reduce blood flow to the extremities in case, our hand gets lopped off or, by a wild creature or a sword or something. So we don't bleed to death. It changes the dilation of the pupils in the eyes so that we can take in more light and see better because we're vision-oriented, upright primates. It will send signals to the digestive system to evacuate the bowels and be like, so that we have a better chance of running faster. It will begin preloading all the big muscle groups, actually all the muscle groups in the legs and torso, so that we can run faster. It will increase heart rate and blood pressure, again, so that we have higher physical abilities in the coming moments. And one of the things that does, these stress hormones I'm talking about, is they go to different portions of the brain and they tell that portion of the brain, increase your efficacy, increase your efficiency, or decrease your efficiency. Like, we want to turn you on, we want to turn you off. This part over here, the part that is like focused on 5th century French poetry, we don't need you right now because we're going to run from a lion. So over here, definitely turn you on. This stuff, shut off. And this stuff is where math is done, is where conceptual thinking is done. This is where detailed logical analysis and cause and effect relationships and forward predictive modeling, those are all up here in the prefrontal cortex. And it releases, I forgot the name of them, but it's this little enzyme that basically inhibits the neurological activity in the prefrontal cortex. Kind of think of it as like jump in the middle of the stream and prevent the signals from working. And so that's what puts us into a state of brain fog. That's why sometimes our memories during these moments are a little bit impaired. But it also goes to this part of the brain called the hippocampus, which is kind of responsible for memory encoding. And it kind of changes the way that operates. And it tells the hippocampus, it's like, we've got a lot of data coming in and we don't have time to process it all. Because that part that does the really good processing, the prefrontal cortex, we just put that one to sleep. So we don't have that ability right now. And waiting around for it will be a problem and a huge metabolic load and la, la, la. And so change the way you store memories. Increase the amount of data that goes into each chunk. And so we have these bigger and bigger memories that are being stored into our memory banks. But this big memory, the thing that's threatening is the lion attack, but the big memory is all of it. It's not just the lion attack, it's the lion, the water I was just drinking, the mud I'm standing in, the smell of the cinnamon tree nearby, right? Whatever kind of thoughts and feelings I was having at the time, the feeling of my, handmade tunic against my skin. Everything that I was sensing in that moment becomes stored as a big memory blob. And it's like, we'll take care of that later. Just store the big stuff now. So it does. And that means after the moment of extreme stress, our memories are not functioning the same way. They're fractured. They're inaccurately consolidated with neighboring memories. And this is why triggers happen, right? So it was a lion attack on the plains of the Serengeti 100,000 years ago. But that same guy, 2 or 3 days later, is walking through the bush with his buddy, and they walk underneath a cinnamon tree, and then he smells the cinnamon. And suddenly the brain says, what memories do I have that are associated with this smell? And then one of them pops up to the top, and it's a great big memory because it's got all this junk consolidated inside it. And it says threatening. And the brain says, oh, we need to look inside there. We need to figure out what's inside this memory. So it pops it open and then basically drops it into your nervous system right now. And what it drops into your nervous system is kind of a snapshot of what happened during the moment of extreme stress, the moment of overwhelm, the moment of trauma. It is like a snapshot in time because that's what it was doing, was consolidating all experiences. And then when it opens that up, it distributes all that information across all the systems of the body. So now my heart rate is up, my pupils are fluctuating, my blood pressure is raised, the degree of stress hormones in my system, the cortisol and norepinephrine in my system are jacked out again. Why? Because I smelled cinnamon, and cinnamon was connected to one of these memories. This is what being triggered is. Being triggered is not something mystical. It's not some magical whatever. I don't even know what people are saying there, what they call it now. But this is what it is. It's a purely understandable engineering mindset, cause and effect relationship. You have a big trauma memory that's stored that needs to get processed. Why does it need to get processed? Why can't the brain just shove that back down and into the depths and just never deal with it again? Some brains do. But those memories they tend to like leak out into the system somehow, and that person ends up with a general state of anxiety. Arguably, this is where general anxiety comes from, is that you've got many of these big trauma memories that have been pushed down so far and suppressed that the kind of general sense of fear, threat, survivability that is contained within these memories is kind of leaking out of the system. And now I just kind of have this general sense of unease, stress, and anxiety in my life all the time. How do I go get over that? I just did a video on this one a couple days ago. But it's like the way we do that is we got to go digging for these memories and pull them up on purpose and then resolve them. Okay, so I got this big memory inside, and it's just like, I smell cinnamon, and now my system is completely stressed out. And what happens? Emotional dysregulation. Because that is the body's way of healing big trapped emotional charge. So I dysregulate and I shake and my pupils go crazy and my blood pressure goes wild and I walk around like a wild animal. Oh my God, it all makes so much sense now. And now we're going to link all the way back to the beginning, which is me being that dysregulated animal the moment that my girlfriend says that she wants to end the relationship, and I lose my mind. And I'm like, oh, that's what's going on. What's going on here is that I have deep-seated attachment trauma for the first 2 or 3 years of my life about abandonment, about being unwanted, about not being good enough, about punishment coming if anyone is displeased with me. I have these beliefs inside me, and they create a network of terror. And then it's realizing, from there, it's just a short little leap to realize that this chaos that erupts inside my nervous system when my girlfriend is getting ready to walk out the door is just a way of my nervous system trying to process a profound and voluminous amount of terror that lives inside my system. Wow. Really? Yes. Yes. That's all that it is. And that kind of led me to this statement, like, all these marketing people are up in my business telling me that I need to come up with more elevator pitches and quick pithy phrases and that kind of stuff. And I'm like, here's one for you. Trauma is nothing more than a lesson learned. The only uniqueness to it is that in that moment, the lesson that I learned was learned with a great deal of emotional intensity. And so because it was a great deal of emotional intensity in a moment where my nervous system is overwhelmed, that lesson that got learned and put inside one of these big memory bubbles it's a big trauma memory that sits in my system waiting for the day that we're safe enough and resourced enough that my psychology and my conscious mind can pop that bubble, release it into the system, and process all of the emotional intensity that's trapped therein. Hopefully while my prefrontal cortex is still online. This is a big part of my journey, the things I learned, and what I now teach. Because this stuff that I'm talking about here, I learned little snippets from here or there, but it'd be this thing where it's like you sign on for this whole program and there's a monthly recurring fee or a big $1,000 package or whatever, and they might drop in 1 or 2 bits of this data that is just kind of helping me put the pieces together. But I've never seen anyone portray the whole sequence like this. And if they're out there, please tell me. I would love to work with this person. I'd love to collaborate with someone else that is coming from the same mindset, that understands that this is kind of the systematic approach to trauma, emotional dysregulation, and how we heal it. Did we talk about how we heal it? It's kind of in there between the lines. Okay, cut that out because of the fly. Did I talk about how to heal it? It's kind of in there between the lines. Yes, the way you heal trauma is to intentionally seek out these big trauma bubble memories that you have that live inside you that seem scary. Basically, anything that triggers you. You seek these out, and then you approach that trigger and all the various difficult memories connected to it in a very structured and systematic way that allows the body to discharge this emotional potential or electrical potential that's stored inside. And then we really go digging for what is the thing that is actually the fear. What is the thing that's actually triggering a state of terror? And then we devise a systematic process of exercises that allow us to, or challenge us to move closer to that fear. And then eventually we discharge the emotions. We normalize or equalize the fear through something that's very close to exposure therapy. And we get to a point where that thing that has been triggering us for years, decades even, is not triggering anymore. We get to the point where these pains that we have that have been dominating our life and realizing that how many times in my life did I just not even have a choice because my subconscious was in there driving the bus? that those go away because I now have regulated mastery over myself and my emotions, and I have built a quality, deep-seated, delicious relationship with myself. And what happens? You come to the crucible. You come to that moment where you're like, oh my God, this is the thing. This is that moment where she's walking out. Here I am again. This is the moment, looking at her, ready to leave, that I have faced so many times in my life, and I lost it every time. But I'm like, I'm not feeling it this time. It doesn't feel that terrible. It's like, yeah, there's sadness there. Maybe some dissatisfaction, maybe some resentment, right? But these are like low grade. They're not dysregulating. They're just uncomfortable. And say, okay, this is the way things are. And I'm not going to lose it because I don't feel like losing it. I'm not suppressing the negative emotions. They're totally welcome here, and they can flow through me as they like. It's that they don't even arise to begin with, because I understand what's going on here. This is a self-contained, autonomous human being, and they want to go live their life in the direction that they want to live. And just the fact that their direction does not align with my direction doesn't mean I'm bad. It doesn't mean I'm unlovable. It really doesn't mean anything. And so I can allow this to happen, and I can process the emotions that happen inside me, and I can move on with my life without any drama. That's the path that I walked. That's the path that I teach. That's the path that I'm passionate about. I want more and more people in this world to understand this path and all the meticulous detail that goes into understanding how these things work. Because I want people to feel alive and empowered and free and happy and joyful, regardless of whether or not this person chooses to stay or go. I want to help people understand that having this deep, delicious relationship with self and having a grounded mastery over my own well-being and my own nervous system is the thing that allows me to be a superpower in so many aspects of my life. And arguably, most importantly, and the thing that I'm most passionate about, is that all of this came about because we had parents that didn't understand this stuff. All of this came about because of our own attachment wounds. All of this came about because we had a mother and a father that didn't understand what we needed in the crucial moment that we needed it, or how to address the wound that happens in that baby's nervous system immediately after it happens. And so my drive and my passion on this earth, and the thing that I'm measuring all this against, is how effective is this approach in preventing attachment trauma in the next generations of children? Can I help you become such a master of your own emotional state and your own relationship with fear and the ability to process it and release it quickly so that it does not dominate your life, that you can be acutely attuned to your infant? So much so that you instantly know when that infant has reached a point of overwhelm, and you know exactly what to do to rectify that situation, to make sure that that situation is not encoded as a long-term memory. And if we can do that, we can change the world. Guaranteed. No question. 1,000 families, 1,000 new infants that go through this process and come out the other side into their childhood and adolescence with a secure, stable, grounded, fearless nervous system, there's no question that will change the world. They will change the lives of every person around him. It will change the electorate. It'll change the way politics works. It'll change the way law enforcement works. It'll change everything. It's a dream and a passion and I hope you can join me for this ride. I wish you the best. Peace.